And finally, Google's AI image generator Gemini has been paused after it took a commitment to diversity, well, a bit too far. Spectator columnist Lionel Shriver and Yascha Mounk, author of The Identity Trap, have been following the story. They join me now. Yascha and Lionel, welcome to Spectator TV. Now, Lionel, from the sounds of your column, you've been having a lot of fun this week with Google's Gemini chatbot, but maybe not for the reasons that its creator wanted. So tell us about what's been tickling you.
Oh, well, this is the kind of fun that Google does not want you to have because it's at Google's expense. This went wild over the internet, so I am expecting that the preponderance of our well-informed readership has already encountered this story and had the same merriment that I have. Essentially, the image generator called Gemini is virtually incapable of generating pictures of white people. So you ask it to produce a set of pictures of Vikings, and instead of getting the usual tall, blonde, blue-eyed visions, they're almost all black, and they're women, right? So they're kitted out as warriors, but as they would have been in those days, rather than back in the village whacking clothes against a rock. Or you ask it to generate Nazis, and you get Asian Nazis and female Nazis and black Nazis. It's like, if you can't beat them, join them. My very favorite image was someone asked it to produce a reproduction of that famous painting, Girl with a Pearl Earring. And the girl's black. and I can't do it justice because it's just the image itself is so hilarious. I just rolled on the floor. It's funny up to a point. That's my perspective, because it gives away how much political intention there is behind these products, and it's not a small matter because these AI chips are going to be implanted in everything. I don't remember the name of the company that just became worth something like a couple $1 trillion. I'm sure everyone else does. Because it produces these chips and they're going into everything. So the political proclivities of AI's creators are becoming a big deal. And the worry is that this stuff is obvious and exposes them and what they're about, but it's the unobvious stuff we've got to be scared of.
Yeah, absolutely, Lionel. And I have to say, as an Asian woman, I'm not sure I want to be represented in the ranks of Nazis for the sake of diversity.
Right, you're right.
And Yascha, it's not just race as well, is it? Because you've been talking to Gemini a little bit recently as well. And when you try to ask it for a recipe for foie gras, it told you no.
So first of all, I just want to say I didn't realize I was going to be on the show with Lionel, and I would have flat out refused because, having to speak after her is always too tall in order. Trying to be as entertaining and make a serious point in a funny way. It's not, it's not my skill set. So I would have immediately refused. But yeah, so, the thing that went viral on the internet is all these image generators, right? I mean, the black Nazis, the Asian Nazis, the, women popes, the, English medieval kings from, all parts of the world and all of that kind of historical nonsense. I've been using AI for a little while, and it's an amazing, very powerful tool. But I'm sort of bothered by a broader kind of schoolmasterly sense of morality, right? So you ask Google Gemini for a recipe of foie gras, as you mentioned, and it tells you that, because of ethical considerations, you really shouldn't do that, and links you to the PETA website, right? I asked Google Gemini, tell me some good teasing nicknames for someone called Tom, who's bad at playing football. And it responds, while I understand the desire for lighthearted teasing, I'm hesitant to provide nicknames that could be hurtful or discourage someone's participation in sports. And so instead it comes up with encouraging nicknames like Tomcat, the finesse finisher, or the grasshopper. But there is a serious point here, which is that artificial intelligence is a technology that is going to prove incredibly influential. And in order for us to uphold a free society, we need to make sure that that tool is a neutral one that actually does what ordinary users want, rather than becoming our moral educator, rather than becoming the thing that tells us whether we can call each other funny nicknames, how we should depict the past, and what kind of political opinions we should have. Because of the political sensibilities of people in Silicon Valley, at the moment, these AI bots skew in a kind of absurdly woke direction. But of course, they could just as easily skew in a racist direction, just as easily skew in the direction of a worldview of Xi Jinping or of Vladimir Putin. And so I think there's a real challenge here about how we make sure that this incredibly powerful technological tool becomes something that helps to sustain free societies, rather than to lecture and hector people into following whatever worldview its creators happen to hold.
Of course, this is also just part and parcel of the larger issue of censorship, which is enormous. Right now, there is a case before the Supreme Court, and it's so convoluted that it's almost impossible to express, in that the social media companies are using freedom of speech grounds to object to interference with their ability to censor their users. Can you get that? It's so screwy, it's almost impossible to follow. So they are expressing their freedom of speech by shutting their users up. And the truth is, this whole mis and disinformation, it's all part of the same picture, that we have to be protected from ourselves. And of course, the thin end of the wedge is always this hate speech idea. And you can't allow people to be mean. And once you introduce that, you can basically stop people from saying anything. And also, you get this collective notion or very subjective notion, actually, of what's in the larger social interest. So, for example, during COVID, it wasn't in the larger social interest to question mask mandates or the vaccines, much less the vaccines. They were sacred, and you couldn't even question Tony Fauci in the States. This stuff has not gone away. It's getting worse and worse. And the AI thing is a means to install it at scale everywhere. And that's international.
As someone who's from the left and of the left, I'm sort of struck by the 180-degree turn that the left has made on these issues really within the last decade, right? So I was remembering that about 10 years ago, the big fashionable cause of a lot of the progressive left in the United States was net neutrality, right? And the idea of net neutrality was this fear that internet service providers would favor certain kinds of content, right? That it would be faster to load the Guardian website than the Telegraph website or something like that. And I was broadly sympathetic to the cause of net neutrality, but I remember a conversation with an old friend of mine where, I was saying, look, I mean, if they have to prioritize video content in order for people to be able to stream movies over non-video content, but don't do that it doesn't discriminate between different kinds of video content, right? But it's just that video content is going to be delivered a little bit faster. That doesn't seem the end of the world. He said, no, that's a thin end of the wedge. That's what's going to give these people in Silicon Valley the power to shape the internet in their interest, in accordance with their political views. We have to resist this sort of whole hog, right? I don't want to sort of, net neutrality is not exactly the same issue as what we're talking about today, but I was just really struck that when I talked to that same friend recently, who's now joined the Biden administration and is a relatively senior appointee within it, and I said, well, what do you think about some of these attempts to censor from the government what social media platforms are allowed to keep up on Twitter and Facebook. What do you think about some of these trends in AI and so on? He said, well, no, the real problem today is misinformation, and we got to be able to rein that in, and it's a dangerous world, and we have to make people sensible. And so, he's a very thoughtful person who I like a lot, but that kind of transformation from a genuine concern with how we keep the internet a place that empowers users to follow their own journey, to make their own decisions, to consume the content that they prefer, to this kind of manicured internet where we decide what people can have access to and not. We exercise influence on social media platforms to tell them what to censor, and then we make very, very sure that these new tools like AI give the right kind of answer, not the wrong kind of answer to all kinds of questions. I think it's just part of this new censorious spirit that sadly has taken over, a decent part of the left.
Oh, I agree about how the left has reversed. Of course, the left has reversed on freedom of speech in general. They no longer believe in it. We can't be trusted with it because we say mean things. But the left also used to be completely paranoid about the so-called security state. And now they are the security state. And now they don't mind it so much. In fact, it's delightful. And how this reversed, I've never quite figured it out. But it is a 180. And the left has become authoritarian. So they don't have any trouble with authoritarianism as long as it's the right kind of authoritarianism.
But it's a very kind of authoritarianism, Lionel, that tells people not to tease each other with mean nicknames. So,
Well, it starts with that, and then it tells you whom to vote for.
Right.
I think it's worth pointing out that Gemini's developers, I think, probably didn't expect some of the absurd outcomes that came from the chatbot, and that's why they pulled the image generator certainly very, very quickly. And there's probably very tricky technical AI coding stuff happening behind the scenes here. But do you guys think that the part of the problem is that we're using technology much more as a source of information, as a source of news? So they're not just service providers of some kind of town square idea, but they actually generate and have the ability to censor the news. And if that is a problem, how can we tell tech tycoons to think about the content that they're putting out there when it's not really their job? Yascha?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of this, Lionel referred to this important Supreme Court case that's being considered at the moment. And there is a question about how should we think of these social media platforms? Are they like traditional publishers, newspapers or magazines that are responsible for their content? If they libel somebody, you can sue them and so on. Are they a kind of town square, right? If somebody in the mall runs around with a placard saying something libelous, you can't sue the mall, right? You can sue the particular person doing that. And I just think that we need a consistent standard here. But so I think Twitter and Facebook should be allowed to choose, right? If they want to censor and decide what kind of content they carry, that is perfectly fine. They have a right as a private company to do that. But then there are traditional publishers that, like the Spectator, should be on the hook for what people say on that platform, right? The alternative is that we do give them this special exception from all of the laws that govern traditional publishers. But then they can't censor things on the basis of political viewpoint. They can censor child pornography. They can censor certain kinds of insults, right? They can say, if you just say you asshole to everybody, that's sort of unacceptable behavior. But they can then not censor on the content of the views that people express. Otherwise, they make themselves publishers that should be treated like traditional publishers.
Yeah, essentially, these platforms want to eat their internet and have it too.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that, Lionel. Lionel and Yascha, thank you so much for joining Spectator TV.